Hi, babe.
Hi.
We're back. We're doing this again.
We're back. I'm really excited.
How do you feel right now?
Good.
Like in
Good.
your pregnancy, not just like emotionally. Like, how do you
pregnancy?
feel? How far along are you right now today?
28 and a half weeks.
28 and a half weeks.
I guess a little more.
We're officially in the third try.
We're officially in the third try. I feel really pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
I feel pretty constipated.
You do.
I do.
Yeah, you want to open the episode with that. Yeah. It may be a theme throughout this whole episode.
I don't
Especially
even
just
know.
given the content that we're going to get into. It usually makes you want to or feel like you need to poop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about
Poop.
the home birth today. Well, we're talking about birth. So,
Yeah.
birth is a lot of poop.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that.
I mean, it can be. It's not for everyone, right?
No, but it's a thing that people talk about. And a lot of people who have birthed are really embarrassed about the fact that they poop
Yeah.
when you birth. But you're doing it right because that's the same muscles you have to push with.
Yeah, and if you just think about it, it's just this massive release, right? So it makes sense that if, you're a little backed up,
Yeah,
everything's coming out.
right. It kind of makes me sad, people that feel so
Self-conscious.
embarrassed about it. Not that I'm like a open pooper.
Hey, come look at this poop. That's not part of our relationship.
I'm not
No.
that at all.
No.
But I mean, when you're birthing, I just feel like, anything goes. Who cares?
Yeah, and
The doctors are used to seeing it. Midwives are used to seeing
right,
it.
it's the husband, if that's the dynamic, right?
Right.
Like that is the person that the wife is usually self-conscious of, right? Like it's enough. It's already a lot that you're watching your partner crown, right? And the baby emerge from your vaginal canal.
Right.
But then you also see a little poop rocket fly out at the same time, right?
Well, not to mention,
what?
but I
That's
mean-
where we draw the line?
The butthole gets huge.
It does. The butthole turns into a whole other... I didn't even know a butthole could look like that. I've seen plenty of butthole in that day.
All right, I really didn't think this is how we were going to open the home birth story.
No,
but
but,
I can't help it. I have constipation on the brain.
Before we get into our episode's content today, and yes, this is going to be our home birth story. I just want to preface, this is our story. This is not the story that everyone has. And by no means are we saying in this week's episode that this is the right way or the only way that birth is possible and or valid, but this is our story and we feel like it's important to share it with everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. But before we get into that, okay, I just want to say we've talked a lot about doing this podcast over the last couple weeks and just how this space really calls for us to come together and to communicate in ways that we obviously we are very strong communicators at home, but we rarely have this time, just the two of us anymore, to sit down and chit chat.
Yeah.
And it's fucking awesome.
It's been really great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's felt like a date.
Yeah.
And it's great. I love it. I'm smiling. I'm almost blushing. It's felt really good.
I almost feel just as a piece of advice, if anyone listening is going through it at home, just grab some microphones and just have a conversation and record them and see what happens. You don't have to put it out in the world for anyone.
That's interesting.
But for you and your partner to be able to go back and listen to how you converse, it's just so special.
Yeah, totally.
I love that we're doing this. I love you so much.
Me too. And this is our first, doing these has been our first time away from our daughter.
Yeah.
And it's a cute little morning date.
Yeah. Let's
Love
do
it.
it forever.
Okay.
For the next 100 years.
Okay.
Okay, how do we want to start this home birth episode?
I feel like we already talked about how we got pregnant.
Right.
Definitely want to listen to that episode. I think maybe it's starting with how we decided that we wanted to have a home birth.
Business of being born. I think that's where we start.
Okay.
I was 19, you were 21, 22.
Very early.
The first 6
Or
months.
maybe a little later, though. Whatever.
No,
It doesn't matter.
We watched that movie in Dearborn.
Did we?
Yes, I remember us
Why
watching
did I feel like we watched it in Brooklyn?
No. We watched it in Dearborn.
All right. Well, we watched this documentary.
The first apartment that we ever kind of lived together. It was your apartment, but I spent a lot of time there, right?
You moved in for the summer.
Yeah, but nobody knew about it, like in your family, right? But I did. I moved in for the summer before I left for LA. Yeah, it was our first time living together, and we watched this movie.
So like 19 and 21.
Yeah.
Ricky Lake made a documentary called The Business of Being Born surrounding home birth and really like the business that is of being born as far as like
in the hospital.
Hospitals, many, babies being born between the hours of 9 and 5 and, not on holidays. Like, I mean, there's a ton of stuff in that film. If you've never seen it, you definitely should. I mean, it's old as hell now, but it's incredible.
Whether or not you're planning on like having children or, being part of that process. It's just such a interesting film.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
To just like wrap your head around how we bring life into the world right now. And how like the industry has changed so drastically over the last couple hundred years.
Right.
Like since the beginning of time, we as human beings have been having babies at home.
Right.
Right? Every animal has a baby at home, so to speak. Like that's just how we've done it forever.
I've been chatting about home birth on Instagram this week, and someone from, I want to say the Netherlands, but don't quote me, they were talking about how it's the opposite of the US. What's normal is, what's common, I guess I should say, is giving birth at home. You only birth in a hospital if there's some kind of complication.
There's an emergency of some sort. Yeah.
So, in many places, it's still the norm to birth in your home with midwives who are highly trained in birth. But for us, we watched that film, and I think right after that, I was
right
like,
away.
I want to have a home birth.
Yeah.
There was no question for us. There was never a question for me about giving home birth, having a home birth. I am the type of person who I'm actually more scared of the idea of having to go into a hospital to birth. And I've thought about like why that is. I don't know if I'm just like squeamish about medicine. I don't know if it's because my dad died young and I like saw, him in a hospital. And so it's associated with that. My mom owned a retirement home growing up. I actually lived in, so I was around a lot of elderly people. It felt like when you're sick, you go to the hospital and maybe the outcome isn't always great.
Right.
So maybe like part of that is deep within me, but the idea for me never sounded appealing. So it wasn't like a huge decision for us.
No.
However, when we started talking about it, we started interviewing midwives and I started researching different people. And you definitely wanted to have a conversation with an OB. In the process. I felt a little more like, I don't really care, but I appreciated that you wanted to have that conversation just so we could have we could have a comparison.
Yeah, so we can compare the two, approaches. I mean, it had already taken us so long to get pregnant, and there was already some sort of medical intervention. We were like already part of the system at Columbia Hospital in New York City.
And we had a miscarriage,
right,
so we'd experienced pregnancy loss.
So like we were just used to being in that environment, and I just said, listen, if we're here, we got across the first finish line, right? Like I think we owe it to ourselves and to our children just to gather as much information as we can right now before we make these life-changing decisions.
Yeah, that's a good point because I actually kind of forgot that I was in that space early on because we had a pregnancy loss and we were already set up with a fertility center.
Right.
When we found out we were pregnant with Kilmer, I was going in like
once a week.
At least.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe more for the first 10 weeks.
Not normal at all.
Right. I mean, most people, like maybe you can beg your doctor for blood work or like beg for an ultrasound that early, but like we were in there a ton.
Yeah,
and I was just like going in to say hi and be like, can we listen to my baby?
Right. Because if you just get pregnant, like naturally, normally at home without any sort of medical intervention, like when is your first appointment? It's not until 12 weeks?
I would imagine.
Like you can't even get in for some sort of ultrasound until 12 weeks, I think.
Unless
maybe it's 8 weeks. Don't count me on that. But
we don't know.
Yeah.
So we were our early part of the pregnancy, the first 10 weeks is how long they'll allow you to stay there. And I stayed for every single day of that first 10 weeks. We were really heavily monitored.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we ended up switching to midwives, it was a different situation. And not that you're not monitored, like you have the same amount of checkups, and the frequency that you see your midwives is the same frequency you would see your doctors. Any testing, ultrasounds, anything you want, you can get. But it was a different kind of care.
Yeah.
And it was very like trusting the process that everything is going right, as opposed to anticipating that everything is going wrong.
Right.
And it was definitely a shift.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the first and only conversation we had with an OB, right? We had a Zoom call with a doctor.
Highly recommended.
Yeah, one of like the top in the field in New York City. And basically, like, she got on the call and was like, you need to start taking baby ibuprofen now. And without even like running any tests on your body or like really having any conversations, it was just like
the only thing that she said was, how old are you?
Yeah, right.
And I was 36. And then she was like, okay, so she said, I'm going to send you in I'm going to write a prescription. Not that you need a prescription, but she was like calling it in. And I was like, well, I don't know if we need that yet.
And just, important note, historically, I say that a lot, important to note on this fucking podcast, but important to note.
It is important.
You have an aversion to all medicine. You are highly sensitive. You don't like taking anything at all unless there's weed in it. And no, but just like, you just don't, right?
Yeah.
And so that was kind of this first red flag that like, oh, this is a different approach.
And I also felt like right away I was kind of being treated differently because of my age. And, I just take issue with that on so many different levels of the way that we call this like geriatric pregnancy without actually looking at like the composition of the person and what's going on with them. And then it also kind of like put a fear in my head, So I remember when we did finalize our midwives and we went, I was like, this doctor told me that I should be taking this. And they were like, well, do you have, I don't know exactly, do you have high blood pressure?
Right.
Like, is there this? Is there that? Like, here's kind of the check mark things.
Of what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
Does this run in your family? Does this? Yeah.
Are we noticing this? Have we seen this? Are you feeling this? Whatever their checklist was. And they were like, listen, if we saw those things, then yes, we would tell you to take the baby ibuprofen or whatever it was needed, which I really appreciated because it felt like, let's identify an issue and then figure out to treat it, but let's not just start throwing shit at the wall because maybe,
But that's the thing. It was all issue-based. There was never a single question on that call about like, hey, how are you? How are you feeling? Like, what do you want to do? Those questions don't exist in the hospital.
Well,
for the most part.
This was kind of my number one thing when we were hiring midwives. And in the second round is like when I get on the phone with the midwife, the very first thing, or doula, whoever, the very first thing I want them to say to me is, how are you? How are you feeling?
Yeah.
And not every midwife has done that, to be fair.
Totally.
When we interviewed people in New York for Kilmer's birth, it was kind of a mess a little bit. Like, which I actually think was just the universe working in this way to give us the midwives that we did end up with. But like, couldn't schedule a call with one. One person didn't show up. One person I thought was rude. The only people I could actually get on a great call with were the people that we ended up hiring.
Yeah.
And sweet Janice of New Jersey, home births, if anyone's in the area in New Jersey, got on the phone, and I will just never forget, like, you weren't there.
No, I was out of town.
I recorded it. Her calming energy, and she talked to me for over an hour on a consult call. And she walked me through everything, like everything that they do in appointments, that they do in births, that they, do or don't do, my wishes, what happens after birth. Like, it was so detailed and beautiful and like so much care. And it was in that moment where I was like, this is the kind of care that I want to receive,
And you called me in tears afterwards.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
like, I think this is it. But I felt so weird because we couldn't get on other calls
Yeah.
with people. And
We were also in a special situation because we had a place in New York, in the state of New York, and we had a place in the state of New Jersey. So we were having conversations with people in both states. And legally, like, you have to hire a midwife that works in the state where you are going to give birth.
no,
No?
they just have to be registered.
In that state.
Yes. So
Yeah.
we talked with New York midwives who are licensed to give birth
In New Jersey.
That's
That's right.
Our midwives that we went with were not licensed to give birth in New
In the
York
state of New
because
York, yes.
Jersey has just a lot of strict laws surrounding home birth.
Yeah, and there's a lot of talk in New Jersey about making home birth illegal, too.
They're putting a lot of regulations on it.
Yeah.
There's been quite a few things that have
Mhm.
happened. What's next? Let's see.
Well,
What
we
was I
had a
gonna say?
midwife
Oh, wait.
in the state of New York first, or that we were working with, right? And then we like switched midwives early on.
No, that was when we were trying to get pregnant.
Oh yeah, never mind. Scratch that. But leave it, because like
I know.
sometimes we get
Scratch
shit
this
wrong.
part. The next thing, one of the things that, again, I said I've been talking about this on Instagram quite a lot this week, and somebody asked me a question, and they were like, "Don't you have so much anxiety? I can't imagine not having like a team of doctors."
Mm.
And I want to address that question because I felt so perplexed by the question because we had such an incredible birth team, right? Our two midwives, their assistant, who is now a midwife, so three women.
midwives, yeah.
And then we had our doula, and then we had someone who documented the birth who was also a doula.
Yeah.
So it was 5 women that were birth workers that were in this space that were with us. And I think what maybe a lot of people don't realize is, number one, midwives are highly, highly trained.
Yeah.
They are trained in birth. Doctors are more trained in risk and in surgery.
Right.
You know, I mean, not that they don't do births,
Right.
but like that's how their training leads, which is
It's a different
very
process. Yeah.
important. It's a different process.
Of course.
But
And
midwives
very
are
important too. Yeah.
right. They're highly trained in birth, and they're also highly trained in like typical things that could go wrong in birth. And
Yeah.
I actually think we should bring a midwife in,
Yeah.
maybe like our midwives from here, who can talk about this in a more accurate way.
Right.
So nobody get mad at us
Yeah.
because I'm pregnant.
Yeah, we're gonna have our midwife come in, and we'll get more into the details. But like, this is our story right now of how we got to where we
Right.
were and where we are now. And yeah, we'll bring in more of the technical information later on.
Like I remember going in and being like, okay, what if something goes wrong? And,
Yeah.
and
Well, let's go back for
again,
a second. Like, we met the midwives on a Zoom.
No. I still want to say this.
Okay, but I mean, I'm gonna frame it in the context of like our first appointment. Like, what does that appointment look like when we went and met them for the first time? Because that was a conversation that we
All right,
had.
babe. All right.
Well,
Go for it. Frame it.
I gotta frame it.
It's important to note.
It's important to note that the appointments look different than they would if you were going to a doctor. Specifically, our midwives that we decided to hire and bring on board worked out of their home in Teaneck, New Jersey, right? So like we would go to their house for our appointments. We would go down into their basement, and there were 3 women, like just glorious, holy women sitting in the basement. And, you know, that first appointment, I think let's speak some to that of what that like emotionally felt like and what our big takeaway from that first appointment was.
Yeah, I mean, I could cry thinking about those appointments.
Yeah.
It was the most incredible experience. And I remember Janice, Razy, and Mia. I remember Razy saying, like, we spend a lot of time in these appointments with you and getting to know you because when we show up at your birth, we want you to be happy to see us.
Excited to see us. Yeah.
And that, like, when they came in, when we were birthing, I mean, I was in tears and gave them hugs and kisses and,
Yeah.
you know, stroking my hair and like, such a close, incredible
Intimate
relationship.
Yeah.
And, we did ask the questions because so many people, especially given it was our first birth, our moms, everyone was like, is this safe? Is this right? Is this, people are concerned.
Because in our parents' generation, people weren't, for the most part, giving birth at home. Like the medical intervention for our parents' generation and our parents' generation, like that was standard. There was no talk of home births, let alone breastfeeding. Like I was a C-section. I was never breastfed. That's a conversation for another day. But that was just how it went. I was like formula day one, There was just much less of this like homeopathic approach to all of life, let alone like creating life.
Right. I was an unmedicated hospital birth, but I was breastfed, But I think part of that was just in a more rural area.
And you were your mom's fourth, right? I was my mom's first.
She did that with all of her babies.
Right. Yeah, dang.
I know. What a woman. So we did ask the questions, and one of the things I want to say, and again, I'm not going to try to quote anybody, we'll get a midwife in, but I remember them being like, here are kind of 3 of the most common things that can go wrong during birth, and here is how we're trained for them, and like the medicine that they do carry on them and the things that they have. And you also have, other plans in place.
From day one, you have backup plans.
Right. Yeah. This is what they are trained to do. They are trained to spot if something is not going right. And essentially, the number one reason that anyone transfers to a hospital in a home birth is that they lose stamina.
Yeah.
So all midwives right away will be like, when you go into early labor, go take a nap.
Right.
You need to rest. Don't try to go walking. Don't do the whole thing. You need to rest and you need to eat.
And then take a nap.
And eat food, and try to nourish yourself.
And drink lots of fluids.
Lots of fluids, different recipes, bone broths, energy bites,
teas,
all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the number one reason there's a transfer. So you have like the hospital that you want to transfer to, and you know what's going to happen when you get there, ideally.
You have the hospital that you want to transfer to, right? You have the hospital that if it's an emergency, the closest hospital that like you have ABC backup plans.
Right. So if it's an emergency, they were like, if it's an emergency, we're not like getting in the car and just like driving to your hospital. We'll call 911 if there's an emergency.
An ambulance comes and picks you up and takes you to the closest hospital.
Yeah. Otherwise, if, it's a case where you're saying, I don't want to do this, then that's when we're assessing if we can get in a car and go. Or
you can also transfer to a birthing center, right? Like there are options in place.
Yes.
If that's something that you want.
Something ended up happening because we had that idea. Whatever. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But there are options. So, so we had our plans. We knew what we wanted. And, we ended up having a great birth at home.
Yeah. Let's just talk time frame wise, like how frequent our appointments were leading up to the birth. They were once a month for like the first trimester.
I want to say the first 2. Well, it's standard.
Right.
Like it's
those?
The exact same that would happen if you were going to see an OB.
Right.
I believe it's like once a month up until 28 weeks, and then it goes to 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, and then
it goes to once a week.
Yeah, something along those lines.
Yeah.
So all of that followed, and also all of the testing, blood draws, GB test, all of that is the same.
They came to our house and did a home visit before the birth, which was really great. We got to walk them around our house, show them around. It was before that we had built the tent, I believe, that they came to the house, which is where I want to go next in this conversation, is the space that we created at home for birth.
Okay, so there's a book called The Red Tent. That is my favorite book of all time.
Bethany talks about this book all the time.
I think I've read it like 11 times. It's just a stunning, stunning story.
What is the story about, Bethany?
I feel like I never have a succinct way to say it, but it is a Bible story, essentially. It's a fictional Bible story.
Yeah, Old Testament.
Old Testament, Isaac, Jacob, who is it? Sarah and Rebecca.
It's funny that you said Isaac and Jacob first and not Sarah.
Well, because that's like the more known.
Yeah.
whatever. Anyway, it's about
You just said
about Leah and Rachel.
It's about the women, yes.
It's about it's a Bible story told from a woman's perspective.
From the
Leah
female
and
perspective.
Rachel, or Leah's first daughter. Oh my gosh, I'm butchering it. Whatever. Dinah is the main character. But anyway, it's this story of women in the Old Testament and how they approached birth and the womb
And the female cycle.
The female cycle, like all of it. And every time that there was a baby born or they would menstruate, they would go into this red tent. And that's where all of the things happen. And it's just like
ceremonial space.
Ceremonial
It's where you would go to bleed. It's where you would go to birth. It's where the women would gather.
It's where you told stories. It's where you passed on things for generation to generation. Like, it's just a stunning, stunning story. And when I read that the first time, or when we were pregnant, rather, I was thinking about the book and I was like, I want to give birth in a tent. Like, I want to be in a tent. And I told you, I was like, I really, really want a tent.
If there is something like that, if there is like a space that is dreamt of or an idea or even just like a fraction of an idea, I am the type of person that will immediately make that dream come to fruition.
And not only like come to fruition, but like in a fantastical way. This is like a hallmark of who you are and what you do. And Nico was like, I got it. I'm going to make us this amazing
I'm going to build you a tent, baby.
Now, when we say a tent, like you may think like a little pop-up thing on the floor. This was like a gazebo in our house. Like it was
We had a sunroom off the kitchen in Weehawken, New Jersey. And the flood of light in this space was just magnificent. I was searching for a long time for the right structure that I wanted to buy in order to like create this space. I thought like maybe it would be a yurt or maybe it would be like some sort of teepee. Like I went deep into the spiral of, pop-up spaces. And I decided to get like a beach.
Almost like an event space tent.
Like an event tent, yes. I got like, it was like a beige khaki, like 12 foot by 12 foot, 12 foot tall, 12 foot wide, 12 foot long, square tent that had walls, right? But that wasn't enough.
It was like the frame, like the white frame that you kind of pops up and locks into place, and then there's like the tarp that goes over it.
So that was our structure,
like,
but we weren't just gonna have the tarp. So like I put the tarp on the top, and then I went to 6 different thrift stores in and around our spot in New Jersey, and I bought dozens, probably 100 different lace curtains.
Nico came home with like a hockey bag full of lace.
Yeah,
and
all different types of lace.
And zip ties.
Like, yes. Antique lace, vintage lace, like
all
window curtains, all whites and creams, all different textures, all different flavors. And I just got to work. I bought a pack of 1,000 zip ties and I just started building this structure. We. Yes, of course, we.
We spent an entire day draping the walls
with
lace. It was
really special the day that we actually put up the space.
Yeah.
Your brother was in town. Your brother and his wife and your nieces were in town. And so we actually built the space together as a family. They say it takes a village. And that's like, it was just really special that we got to build that with them.
Totally. They helped us.
He's your oldest brother, right?
Very sweet.
Very much so. Like
he's 12 years older than me. So,
it was like a father figure helping us build the space. It was really special.
And
so we got the whole structure up, all the lace curtains. We draped it on the top. I mean, it was intense. It was intricate. But again, not enough. My grandma owned an antique store in Chicago growing up. She was just a collector, a hoarder. We could have 7 episodes about that woman. But I have a vast collection of different like antique silver brooches and just like accessories. I mean, I have a box upstairs of
the baby's kicking.
Baby's
so
kicking.
Much
He's so
right now.
He's so excited. We're about to rebuild this space in our home now for our second birth, and I have a feeling this baby's getting excited about it. So I brought this box downstairs of all of these like different animal figures, all of these silver things, and I just like covered the inside and outside with these brooches, these like, power symbols, right? To just like adorn the space. That's all outside. Then on the inside, it's time to build the altar, right? Because like it was like a month before our birth?
I want to say we put up the tent around between like 37 and 38 weeks.
Yeah.
So it was up for maybe a week or two before we went into labor.
And we really used the space to like connect.
What was beautiful, it was oh God, thinking about the time, it's just like so sweet. It was February.
Yeah. It was cold in New York.
It was cold in New York. You know, everything was just like, Kilmer was born March 5th. So we're in late February and it's chilly and we had like space heaters in there.
Like fireplace, space heaters.
Like a fireplace.
Everything was white and cream. The altar we set up, a bunch of different pictures of our family, candles.
Yeah, we brought in lots of pictures
birth
and
art.
things to look at.
Yeah.
Which here's kind of a funny part of all of this because Nico and I do have so much ritual and spirituality weaved into our lives in so many different ways. At our baby shower, we did something that we'll be doing at this baby shower too, because I just think it's adorable. But we had a blessing bowl and we had all these different crystal beads that meant something. And we asked people to choose the beads that called to them, to say a prayer or a blessing into the beads, and then to put them in a bowl. And then I strung them into necklaces, and it was these necklaces that I was going to like hold during labor.
Right.
And then, you know, we had this altar that I was going to look at the pictures during labor. And then we had a clove of garlic that I was going to peel during labor to help me, you know, remind myself, like blah, 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 blah. No, I didn't do any of that. And yet I'm still so glad for the ritual because the before and the after, intention. It was, yes, there was so much intention, but the during was none of that, which we will talk about later.
We'll get to the during.
I do think it's funny. And actually, when our midwives came in for the birth, they later told us that they looked at the tent and they were like, that's gorgeous, but there's no way we're having a baby in there because, you know, people get all these lofty ideas about how it's going to go. And then you end up, you know, in the closet floor, like clinging to an old T-shirt. And that's just like how birth goes. We did end up giving birth in the tent.
We did.
Again, we can get into more of that. But it is funny to me, some of the beauty that was there with the juxtaposition of like actually being in birth, which is hard. It's really hard.
Really intense.
Back to the, you know, huge butthole in the poop. Like, it's messy.
Do you have to poop yet, by the way?
I'm feeling good so far.
Okay, good. Important to note, I was in the middle of writing an album. In this process. And, you know, it was like right around the time that we built the tent that I was coming home with more finished songs. And so much of this album that I was writing, and it was the first time that I had ever really written music in a serious way. And I was deep in the process. I was spending a couple days in the studio a week and coming home with these songs. And the tent was up, and I brought home the first like real cut of last summer. And we laid on the floor in the tent and listened to this song. And it just like, I mean, it takes my breath away, even still to this day. We just like created this space for us to be able to like share these experiences and take in information and really like pray together as a couple, as best friends who have like, this was our first time doing this, but this is our 1,000th time doing this. And we would go in, we would have conversations with our baby and set intentions and just like really dream up the most perfect magical way we could bring her into this world. And oh, God, that space.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to build it again.
The week before I gave birth, you were at the studio a lot finishing up. And I mean, I have such distinct memories of being alone in the house. I listened to this podcast, which I've already started listening to, called The Birth Hour, which is truly just people telling stories of their birth, kind of like we are now. It's just tons and tons of stories, hour long of births.
It was on all the time, and it started playing in the house last week now, which I know means we're getting closer.
And I had like a week where I listened to it like 8 hours a day, and I would sit in the tent with it on.
We had a rocker in the tent.
There was a rocker, and I would like knit, and I would make the necklaces. And I just like sat in there and did projects in like a nightgown, and it was so still and warm and just like really, really
Juicy.
special.
Yeah.
I just feel like I can like taste the sweetness and the stillness of that time. It was the last time that things were still.
This is true. This is very true.
Okay.
Okay, let's ramp this up a little bit. Let's go to game 7.
So we started placing bets on when the baby was going to come. And I got it right. No, I remember you being like, either we're going to go over or she's going to come at 30 in the 39th week.
Right.
There was going to be a 39, and there definitely was. So
we hit 39.
She came at 39 in 3 days.
Yeah, but we hit that 39th week, and we knew that like shit was getting real.
At 39 and 2, which was a Friday night.
I have no idea.
She was born on a Sunday, so this would have been like a Friday night. I woke up in the middle of the night and I was having contractions.
And did not tell me.
No, I did tell you on this one. Yes, I did. Yes, this night I told you. The next night when it was real, I didn't. Yeah. I love how, here's something you need to know about Nico.
Here
right
we fucking
or
go.
wrong, whether you're right or wrong, you will say it with confidence. You'll say, no, definitely not. And then you'll be like, oh, no, you're right. You're right.
Conviction, baby. That's how I've gotten to where we are. That's why we are in this space. That's why we got a fucking sign.
It's beautiful, the sign. Yeah, that's it. So Friday night, I woke up, I was having contractions, which felt very much like period cramps, but they came in waves. So that was different. I woke you up, and to be completely honest, I was freaking out.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, I'm actually going to do this. This is scaring the shit out of me. I was pretty terrified, and I had a really hard time sleeping, and I didn't want to call the midwives. So you were like, text them. And I was like, no, it's still early. Like your first time, you also just have no idea. Like it was confusing, and I was pretty freaked out. The next morning, we got out of bed and they were still happening. And I had read something about the idea that like get into water, and if they keep going, then you're really in labor. But if they stop, then you're not in labor. So I took a bath, and right away the contractions stopped.
Right.
And I didn't have them for the rest of the day. So I was like, okay, that wasn't it. But when I went to bed that night, I knew deep down, like this is where I didn't tell you, but I was like, we're having this baby tomorrow, you know? So Saturday night, went to bed, and I was like, baby's coming on Sunday. Again, I woke up probably around 1 or 2 a.m. Now I feel like I have to poop.
Whenever you need to take a break, baby, you let us know.
There's no way I could. No, I can't even believe this is like more mortifying of me to even say than our syphilis story. Okay. I woke up in the middle of the night and was having contractions. This time I didn't wake up Nico, and I felt so different about them. I felt like so peaceful. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do what they said. I'm going to just sleep between. And they weren't crazy intense. They were period cramps, you know, but like enough that it woke me up and enough that I was aware. And I started trying to kind of time them with the timer, but like it was so early, it wasn't needed, and I was still sleeping. And then we woke up in the morning, and you're like, hi. And I was like, I'm in labor. Like, this is happening. We went downstairs, and I had all these dreams of like what what labor would look like for me from reading books. And, you know, my idea was that I was going to cook, and I was going to craft, and I was going to move around the house and sway my hips and like be this magical goddess.
Meditate and do the things.
Yeah, all of it. You know, I'm going to put on the whatever. Anyway, so again, very, very mild period cramps that were coming in waves. I sit down to start cutting up some mushrooms. And
which is so funny because mushrooms are now Kilmer's absolute favorite food.
Girl loves mushrooms. It's like the only thing that she likes. So I start cutting up some mushrooms, and I stand up because I have to pee, and my water breaks.
Yeah.
And then I went to the bathroom.
It wasn't like this crazy explosion of water.
No,
Like there was a
so
trickle.
not like the movies.
It
but
can be that,
yeah.
right? But it was like you just like peed your pants.
Right. I think later probably like broke partially, and then later more.
Right.
But yeah, I was like, oh, there's water on the floor, and I don't think I'm peeing.
I was sitting in the chair at the dining room table. You brought the plate of mushrooms over, and you just kind of went, oh. Yeah. And like, I don't think you were wearing pants.
I've never.
Yeah.
I was in a nightgown.
Yeah. And like, oh shit. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, here we are. We stopped eating breakfast. You went straight into the bathroom, right? You went straight to the toilet and sat down.
Right.
And contractions immediately.
Well, when I went to the bathroom, I started to lose my mucus plug.
Right.
Which is, I don't even know, mucus that plugs the center of the cervix, I believe. It's a common sign that when you're about, when labor is imminent, you lose the mucus plug. So, you're taking pictures of that. You're sending it to their team. They're like, yeah,
the midwives,
looks
to
like
the
the
doulas.
mucus plug, good.
We get on the call.
Then it was, it was, contractions were immediate.
So intense.
It went
exponentially more intense immediately.
0 to 100. Like, I was sitting on the toilet, and then it started to become like mild period cramps to like, like when they were there, I wasn't talking through them. I was moaning through them.
Right.
And so Nico immediately called the midwives.
There was no freak out, right? Like, it was a pretty calm and collected time. But I knew it was, we had to get people on the phone. Like, let's just call and say, okay, shit's getting real.
Well, as we were supposed to.
Right, yeah, of course. Yeah. That's protocol. We get on the phone, I put it on speakerphone. We're having, like, in between the contractions, you are totally lucid. Like, you are able to converse. Like, you're talking about how you're feeling. Contraction hit, and you fucking fly away, right?
Yeah.
Like, and the moans just get so intense, so fast.
Well, and I remember you on the phone with Razy, and I was having a contraction, and, she's not saying anything, and you were kind of like, everything was silent, and then you started to say something. She was like, hang on, I'm listening.
Yeah.
Like, I think there was like a moment where you were like, did I lose her? Am I supposed to be telling her what's going on? And she was like, no, I'm just like, I'm listening to what it sounds like.
I'm listening to the contraction, yeah.
And which made me feel so safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were surprised that it jumped so quickly.
Everyone was.
Yeah. So the next thing that happened is we called our doula. Typically the doula comes before the midwives, and they're kind of there to support and encourage. So our doula heard them, and she was like, I'm going to come over right now.
Yeah.
And we were like, really? And because I think there was still a level of, we were like, we don't know if this is normal. Is this normal?
Early labor? Is this active labor?
Right. Like, what's what?
Yeah.
So she came right over. I think she was there within like 30 minutes. And what's that? Why does that sound like Kilmer in your pocket?
Like Kilmer. That was so weird.
That's kind of cute.
Yeah.
She's like, hey.
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 You're talking about me. What the hell was that?
I don't know. So our doula came over right away.
Mm-hmm. I got you back upstairs.
Into bed.
You went into bed. Immediate active labor, right? Like, there was just no early labor. Potentially early labor was the night before, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's what early labor was, But I guess I thought it would like slowly ramp up.
Right.
Which I think for a lot of people it does.
Yeah, but it was there, then it went away, then it was like fucking there.
Yeah.
So we got you up in bed. I'm like holding you close. The door downstairs is unlocked. Our plan was to bring the dogs to daycare immediately when this happened, but we had no time.
We were going to have friends, we were going to pick up the dogs.
I brought the dogs down to the basement, brought them food and water, came back upstairs, and I was attached to you immediately, right?
Hang on, the reason the dogs were in the basement is because we had 2 chihuahuas at the time that could not handle strangers.
For anybody, let alone strangers.
Yeah, they would have eaten them. So that's why the dogs had to be locked up. Doula came in. As she came in, I started to throw up.
Yeah.
Which was a really big part of my labor.
Yeah.
And right away when she got there, she was like, I threw up, and she was like, okay, I'm going to get on the phone with your midwives.
Yeah.
And I remember her hearing on the phone being like, it's,
We're here.
you guys should come over.
Yeah.
And so they did. Yeah, I mean, right away.
Yeah,
They
within a half
got in the
hour,
car.
everyone was there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the birth photographer, right? Like this team of 5 women.
Totally.
We're upstairs, you're in bed, and all of a sudden, these women just start like coming into the space and just setting up shop, Like, oh my God. Unbelievable.
The peace and the calm that they bring with them, the energy. I mean, it's really, really stunning.
Yeah. And like truly, I know you already said this, but the way that they came into the space and just like immediately like enveloped you and your energy, just like hugs, kisses on the foreheads, petting your hair, just like calm.
Yeah.
You were not calm, right? Like the space, there's something about the contraction, and I think about it all the fucking time. But there's something about the cyclical nature of the contraction that is so beautiful, right? Like you are in such intense, like physical sensation for a period of time, and then it goes away and you are back. Like it's just, I don't know, it's so beautiful.
It's so funny because I didn't feel like I was back in between.
Right.
My take, I think, looks a lot different than yours on the outside. I was so surprised at how awful it was.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that because it's so like two things can be true at once. It was a beautiful birth, and it was the birth that I wanted for the most part. And it was so hard and so much more intense than I thought it was going to be. Like, I remember being like very, very surprised, especially at the end, like, oh my God, I am great with pain. Like, this is kind of my jam, this sort of stuff. Like, I'm a push through kind of gal. And it was a lot.
Yeah. It was really intense to witness you go through this.
Being said, I want another home birth, so would do it again,
Right. But how can you even imagine what that is going to be like, Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you actually prepare yourself for that situation? Yeah. I mean, we did a lot, but when it was there, it was just a lot more intense than I think any of us realized.
Right. We went downstairs from being upstairs in the bed. So they were like, let's switch locations.
Midwives come over with a birthing pool. We had talked about this birthing pool a bunch. I had to buy like a specific adapter for the sink to fill up the pool. The plan was to
I was going to have a water birth.
The plan was to bring the pool into the tent. I go downstairs and start setting shit up, right? And we realized very quickly that the adapter that I bought for the sink was the wrong adapter, or the way that our sink was set up, it just wasn't going to work. So we've pretty quickly, we're like, okay, fuck the pool. We're not setting up this pool.
Well, at some point I was like, where is Nico? Tell him to stop setting up. I don't care about the pool anymore. Right. Just get up here. I wanted Nico, I mean, I love you and I want you close all the time, but that was a different level of intensity. When you would say you had to pee, I was shooting you dart looks that was it better be the fastest pee of your life without scrolling Instagram. You know what I mean? Yeah. Get your ass back here as soon as possible. Yeah. Very quickly abandoned any idea of having a birth pool. We had a big bathtub. Yeah,
I go downstairs, I fill up the tub.
Yeah.
You come downstairs. That trek from upstairs to downstairs, especially from the 4th floor to the 3rd floor in that house, those stairs are very steep. Yeah. And it took us probably 5 minutes for you to get down the stairs with those contractions.
And
we get you into the tub.
We labored there.
You labored for a couple hours in the tub.
I couldn't have no concept of time.
Yeah. I mean, it was probably an hour and a half we were in the tub. And this is midday, right?
Yeah. I want to say maybe
afternoon.
3-ish.
Yeah. Afternoon. Yeah.
So we're in the tub. Things got more intense in the tub. And I do remember being like, babe, this is a lot. And one of our midwives being like, it doesn't get any worse than this. Yeah. And I feel like she would just wanted to make me feel good, which this round I'm like, everybody better be 100% honest with me because it did get worse.
Tell me what a contraction feels like.
I don't know. I don't for me, it was a tightening, crashing. I don't know. I can't I don't know, really painful.
Okay.
Everything like squeezing, period cramps on 100. A lot of it rested in my legs. My legs felt like dead weight. I had a really hard time moving. My background is in movement,
Right.
So much of me wanted to be the one that was like standing at a door and swaying my hips or doing, all these dancing or these things that they often talk about in labor, but it was really, really difficult for me to walk or move my legs at all. That was throughout my entire labor. I also was, yeah.
I was just gonna say, and what does it feel like when it stops?
I don't know. For some reason, my memory feels like it never stopped, even though it did.
Got it.
Maybe it's just like so like out of breath. I'm like, oh my God, that just took it out of me.
Yeah. Yeah.
We ended up getting out of the bathtub because at some point it was slowing it down.
Well, you had thrown up a couple more times in the bathtub, too.
Yeah, I couldn't keep
Not
anything.
in the tub, but yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't keep anything down. They were really trying to feed me. Again, number one reason for a transfer is loss of stamina. My midwives felt pretty strongly that I should have an IV. I felt even stronger that I should not have an IV. The IV would be for fluids. And I was already like in so much discomfort, and I don't like needles. I don't think I've ever actually had an IV. So the idea of having something in my arm, limiting movement, and needle, like putting it in, just sounded absolutely awful.
Mm.
And this is something that we've talked about now with our new midwife for this birth, is realizing the fact that like purging and throwing up is a part of my process.
In your practice, yeah.
And, I'm very open about my recovery from eating disorder. Purging was a part of my eating disorder. Then in ayahuasca ceremonies, I think I've really healed a lot of the idea of what it means to throw up or what it means to purge.
Right.
And it has become, not that I do it anymore, but like in this ceremony, it was like spiritual and welcomed.
The release is very real. Yes.
And in birth, it also didn't scare me. I think it like freaked everyone else out a bit because I wasn't taking in
fluids.
What they felt like I should.
Right.
But I still felt strong.
Yeah.
And I couldn't vocalize all of this. So they would be like, we're going to give you an IV. And I'd just say no. Like it was one word and I was just no.
No.
And this went on throughout the birth of me just being like, no.
Right.
I don't want that. And, one of the most beautiful things about home birth is you do have a lot of autonomy in what happens. Now, there's like this delicate balance of the midwives being like, we want you to be safe and we're going to do what's best for you. And we want to respect your wishes.
Yeah.
So we hit a point.
Just time.
We'll wait for that.
Timeline wise. Okay, so you get out of the tub, we go into the kitchen, you're birthing or you're laboring in the kitchen on the kitchen counter for a little bit. My entire job throughout this process was like obviously to be there for you emotionally, but physically I was holding your hips together as much as I could the whole time. Really like the one thing that kind of
Hip
releases
squeezes.
some sort of the contractional pain. Contractional? Sure, just go with it. Is this hip squeeze, right? So I mean, I'm just putting so much force on your hips throughout the entire process.
Which essentially helps to kind of open up the pelvis into more of a round shape, which can alleviate pressure.
There was a point in the kitchen where you hit the floor on all fours, okay?
Purposely, not that I fell.
You didn't fall, yeah. And you start crawling towards the
It was
tents.
like, everyone get off of me.
Yeah, don't touch me, everyone, leave me alone. You just like needed your space for a second. You start crawling towards the tent.
We have this on video.
I see this happening. I walk up to the tent. I pull the curtain back. I mean, it's like out of a fucking movie. I pull the curtain back and you just crawl into the tent. The women are all watching you. It's a very quiet time. And I just look at everyone. I go, well, it's time to have a baby. And we get into the fucking tent. We're lighting incense. I'm creating the space. Songs are filling the space for the most part. The audio up until this point was different.
We didn't cover this part of the music.
Yeah. That's what I'm getting to. Right
Okay.
now. Yeah.
Well, we talked about it in last summer, and
Yeah.
I thought we were going to touch on it then.
Yeah, so much of the album that I wrote was in preparation for the birth. Like so many of the songs that I wrote were like for us to birth
Hang
to.
on. I have to tell. So Nico, we have to backtrack just a moment. Everybody stay with us, okay? Nico, during the time that I was pregnant, was like really in song mode. And Nico, when they do something, they do it big. Like when you go all the way in. And definitely a few times, like I lost you to the album.
Yeah.
In a good way, it was the time. But like you would be in the basement and then you would like come out with like some song.
Yeah.
One day you're in the basement and all of a sudden you come upstairs singing this like Spanish guitar song in another language. By the way, you don't really speak Spanish. And this song, Santa Madre, about like the Holy Mother giving birth in the red tent. And like this, I mean, you have to go listen to the song. We'll link it here with the show. It is this unbelievably powerful song. And I'm listening to it, number one, being like, who the fuck just wrote that?
Where did
And
this
number
come
two,
from?
being like, I'm birthing my baby to this song.
Yeah.
It had the swells, it had the intensity. Like, it's hard for me to listen. Like, I can't listen to it casually. It was. I needed to birth to this song. That was why it came out of you.
I went into the basement. I wrote the song in like a half hour. It was like very clear there was something else in the room with me. There was another power. I came upstairs with this quite literal magic. And I got in the studio, and I mean, over the next month, like we got the version of the song that was playing throughout that last 2 hours, right? I was going to say, like, up until this point, there was a lot of, like, we had, like, a house speaker system that would pick up in different rooms, and it was, like, binaural frequencies playing for the first 6 hours. My producer, Abe Seyfarth, he has an album that's called, fuck, I forget what it's called, but it was a lot of his music that's just, like,
we'll share it.
Vibey, frequency, you know, like, tonal shit, right?
Yeah.
And at some point, it was like, okay, it's time to put Santa Madre on. And we had Santa Madre on loop, basically. There was a 9-minute version of the song that was just on loop for those last couple hours.
Okay, so we're in the 10 and we're still having this IV discussion.
Yeah.
Because now it was like, do we have a long time or a little time?
Right.
It's not common to do cervical checks in home birth. It's low intervention.
Uncommon. Yeah.
It's not common. It's not something that's commonly done.
Yeah.
Because it's low intervention. They're not messing with stuff, which is a really important part of birth.
Yeah.
And my midwife then wanted to do a cervical check because she wanted to have an idea of, are we 5 centimeters? Are we 8? Are we 9 centimeters?
How much time do we have left?
How much time do we have left? If it's a long time, we really need to do an IV. We
need to get you fluids.
Because we need to get some stamina up. Yeah. If it's not, then okay, let's move through. So she went to do a cervical check. Don't ever want one of those again. I somehow did not know. I still feel dumb about this. Like, didn't really realize that a cervical check was the hand going into the cervix and then opening up the fingers to see how dilated you are. Like, I don't know. I just thought maybe that peeked in there with like a little microscope. Ooh, not looking good.
No, I mean, Razy went in the first time and you kicked her
across
the
tent. So when she did a cervical check, I was 7 centimeters.
Yeah.
But I was fully elastic all the way around. Everything felt soft, which was a good sign.
Right. But we still had time to go. 7 centimeters. Like,
7 centimeters. Yeah, you go to 10.
The 9th inning, by no means.
So they were like, listen, Nico, we need you to tell her that we need to do an IV.
Yeah,
this is
it's
important.
time.
Yeah. And again, looking out for my safety, but I didn't want one. At that point, Nico, I'm laying on the floor, and I think that you had actually kind of seen my body push a little bit on its own.
I saw it in your lower back, the way you were arching your back. Yeah.
And you were like, babe, if you feel like you need to push, you know.
Well, no, let me change the way you said that. I said, babe, if you don't want the IV, like, it's time to have this baby.
Let's have the baby.
Like, I see you pushing a little bit. Are you ready to start pushing? And something in you immediately shifted.
Yeah, it was kind of because I still think like on that first birth, like you're a little bit lost. You know, you read about it, you read about active labor and then transition and then the pushing phase, but you're kind of like, am I in it?
Right.
Looking back now, I know that during that time I was in transition because I remember the contractions just being so god awful and me laying in that tent with my eyes closed and being like, if I were in a hospital, I would take every fucking drug they have right now. Like I was so like, I cannot do this. I don't want to do this. It's too late to go anywhere. This was a dumb idea. And for those of you who don't know, that is the hallmark of transition. Transition is a time where basically like the majority of people that are birthing say, I can't do this. I'm done. Like you try to back out and then you start to push. And that's exactly what happened. So Nico said that. And then I was like, well, I don't know. Like, am I pushing? And then my body on its own started to push.
Whoa.
My midwives were very like, normally at, you know, if we would have done a check at 7 centimeters, we wouldn't let you push, but it was very clear your body was doing it on its own. And because you were so elastic all the way around the cervix, I felt comfortable to let you do it.
You're on all fours, basically. Your arms are like propped up on a chair that we had in the tent. Your knees are on the ground. You kept switching one leg up to one leg up. I'm underneath you, right? Like still holding your hips. If I'm underneath you, we take the mirror out so you can see, which you actually didn't want to see what was happening, which was interesting. But like I'm underneath, right? And Razy looks at me
to catch.
and goes, do you want to catch the baby? And I thought I did, right? I thought that was the right place for me to be. But I realized pretty quickly, like, you needed me up by you. And I said, no, this is not where I'm supposed to be. And I went and I sat in the chair that your elbows were on, and you moved your elbows from the chair to my knees, and we were face to face. If you go back and watch the video, you can see where I switched positions, right? But I'm holding your face. And I knew that I needed to help push with you.
Yes.
Like I was on top and I was putting all of my energy, like just forcing it down you. Not forcing, but like helping you push, right?
It's my most memorable, vivid part of birth is looking up at you. And I was never like, I need you to come up here. Like I didn't have anything to do with that. I don't actually remember you switching up to the chair. I just know you weren't there and then you were. And I was like so relieved that you were there. And I remember locking eyes with you and we said like a million things to each other without saying anything at all. I feel like I had this like, I can't do this. And you were like, no, you can. Like, you are. Yeah, exactly. You are. And it was just like, this intensity in your eyes and locking in. And I could feel, I didn't know that this would be a thing, but like, I could feel the baby descend, which is a wild feeling because you can feel the baby like descend down your like through your cervix and into the vaginal canal, which is fucking horrible. Like it's so much pressure, so much intensity.
Well, I mean, when it happened, you screamed, what is happening?
Because I was still like, almost like confused. Like, is this it? Am I going to be here for another hour? Or is it soon? Is this the pushing? Is the baby almost here? Like, even when they were like, you can touch your baby's head. And I did. And I was like, I remember she like sucked back up. And I was like, no, I don't need to touch anything. I don't need to, like, I just need to get this baby out of me. And it still was like, am I doing it?
Right.
You know?
And everyone simultaneously in the room said you already are. This is it.
How do I do it? And they're like, you're doing it.
There's only one way forward.
The only way through is through.
Is through, yeah. And Santa Madre was filling the tent, right? And the song, the last verse of the song is like a chant of me just singing Viva la Santa Madre.
Yeah. And
over and over and over again.
Like with contractions. Because as the baby descends, I was kind of trying to let it, you know, I'm not trying to push because I don't want to rip open. I mean, I am pushing, but not forcing. And so it's like baby comes down for a contraction, then goes back up.
Right.
then goes down, then goes back up, then goes down. And every time it's like a little bit further. And the song was like moving in that same rhythm.
Yeah.
And I 100% experienced the ring of fire. I just remember like shouting fire, 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 fire. And then the head came out.
Yeah.
And you hear, the other midwife
Here she
clapping.
comes.
Head. Yeah.
Here she comes.
And then when her body came out, usually that part isn't supposed to hurt. But that's actually when I tore was her body, because her little Italian hands like flicked. It was in a weird spot, and it flicked and gave me a very minor tear. And
actually, I had a ring on my finger. Actually flicked the ring off of my finger the way that her hand came out.
She wanted that gold.
Yeah, that's my girl. She wanted that gold.
And
there she was.
We had a baby.
Yeah. And there she was.
And right away, baby goes into my arms.
At the end of the song.
Yes.
The song ended, and she was born.
Baby came out, went right into my arms. I'm sitting there with this little thing in my hands that I was just like is so slimy and slippery.
Yeah. And still attached to you, right? Like you hadn't birthed the placenta yet.
Right.
Which people don't realize that also happens. You have the baby and then you birth the placenta.
Yeah. And my first words were, "Is she okay?"
I mean, because the room was silent.
It was dead silent, which is also a part of midwifery. And just like the baby comes, not that they're looking out for, any signs of complications, but it's like this peaceful entry into the world, dim lights, everyone quiet. She let out a scream.
Yeah.
They got her up to my chest. I mean, I'm sitting. If I'm being like 100% honest, didn't feel, I imagined that I would feel this immediate connection. And in some ways, maybe I did, but in other ways, I was just like in shock.
Yeah, it was shock.
It was just complete shock. And almost like she's not here and now she is. I kind of thought as soon as I had the baby, I wouldn't be in any pain. Like my tailbone hurt so bad and I was like so uncomfortable. And I was just like, what is going on? Like it was just a lot at once. I don't know.
She was there. She was in your arms. I kneel down next to you. We're both crying. We're holding our daughter for the first time. You birthed the placenta. We were in this tent surrounded by these powerful, powerful women. And it was time for celebration. And the next couple hours for me are probably the haziest, actually, of the whole day. Because we stayed in the tent. You and I and Kilmer stayed in the tent.
Golden hour, it's called. With my baby, singing songs.
We put on the whole album. We're singing every song. We're just crying. Like, we had a mat in the tent. We wind up laying down. They set a bunch of pillows up. Like, it was the three of us just like in this joyous embrace for the next couple hours.
The women, your team, they just start cleaning your house.
Yeah.
It is left spotless, right?
Yeah.
So they start cleaning everything up. They leave it cleaner than when they came. They're brewing teas, all kinds of teas that...
Kilmer was born at 9:39 p.m., which is crazy.
9:39. I think within 15 minutes, you had her entire birth chart pulled up.
In the tent, yeah.
I remember looking over at you on your phone and getting ready to yell, and then you being like, okay, she's a Pisces sun, a Leo moon, and a Scorpio rising. And then they were like, what do you want to eat?
Yeah.
They started cooking food.
Eggs. They cook us dinner.
Eggs, toast,
They're bringing
avocado,
food into the tent.
brewing teas that I would drink,
house.
use for a sit bath for the next 3 days. Then I got a shower. I did have to get stitched. They stitched me on the couch.
We went into the living room. I'm holding Kilmer. They're doing a check on you. They throw a couple stitches in you.
And then they weigh her,
We went upstairs. You made your way upstairs,
yeah.
Which was fucking amazing that you were able to climb the stairs after that. Yeah, we get into bed. They tuck us into bed, kiss us both on the foreheads, like plenty of tears. Kilmer's in my arms at this point, and they turn off the lights.
Yeah, the big
and
thing
they
is
go
that
home.
that first night I need the big night rest. So you were pretty much up that night. They didn't leave until like 3 a.m. She was born at 3 or 4 a.m., I think.
Yeah. We were in our own bed.
Yeah. It was
She
stunning.
slept on my chest all night. I couldn't sleep at all. You know, I'm holding my child, my first child for the first time in my entire life. I mean, she was so small. She was what, 6.7,
I don't even know.
6.7? Yeah, 6'10". And I'm up all night. And she did a great job sleeping. You know, we have to put a diaper on a fucking newborn. Like, it was just, I've never put a diaper on a baby that small before. We actually didn't have newborn-sized diapers. We had, like, all of our diapers and clothes that we had were, like, for a
Everybody
little bit
was
older.
like, you don't even need the newborn
No,
stuff.
but she was this tiny little thing.
She was in newborn shit
Yeah.
for a long time.
She still
like
fits
6
in
weeks.
some.
Oh my gosh. It was stunning. And my midwives told me, they were like, you don't leave this upstairs nook for a week. You don't walk the stairs for a week. There's like, maybe that's probably for another time, but kind of like a 40-day of rest.
A full postpartum episode.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I will say that this time that I spent upstairs and, you know, you bringing meals and me and Kilmer in this cozy little nest, when I think about that time, everything looks golden. Like the hue on it is just this beautiful golden sunset of sweetness and beauty in it. And it was incredible. It was really, really amazing to be able to birth with you in a setting that we
The way that we had always dreamed of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really
I mean, there's something about that time where the universe cracks open. Like the life force energy that you are exposed to and part of time stops, right? Like you are in between dimensions in that time of birth that is just like the most delicious time I've ever experienced as a human being.
Yeah.
Like I got out of that being like, fuck, I want to work in birth for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Like I want to have 100 kids.
Nico's
like
becoming a midwife right now.
Yeah, I'm working on it. No, doula first, let's be honest. But it is just, oh my God. And you can't know what that feels like until you experience it. And that's not to say that you don't experience like a version of that in a hospital or wherever the fuck you birth, but like the way that we dreamt of this, the way that we planned it, the way that we experienced it, we couldn't have wrote the script better.
It was what was meant for us.
Yeah.
And not that it's meant for everyone.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have kids, you know, the experiences life gives you are what life's supposed to give you. But it was definitely the thing that we needed to have.
And here we are, you know, in our third trimester with our second. We're in preparations for, you know, this second birth. We're going to put up the tent. Like we're creating this space again. We've created this space of a podcast to have these conversations with you and us to like have this time together to reminisce. And this is all part of our birthing story. And we're just so excited that y'all are here with us. And, you know, you're part of it at this point.
That's
and
pretty cool.
We love you. And I had some other things planned, but I think that's the end of this episode, and we'll pick up on postpartum at another time. And this is full of shift.
And let's talk to our midwives about coming in. I think that there could be an interesting conversation there.
I think it's cool if we have our new midwife come in before we have the baby and then after we have the baby.
I like that.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, let's get the fuck out of here. This is Full of Shift. My name's Nico Tortorella.
Bethany C. Meyers, we love you.
I love you.
God.